She does not remember the exact day it started, only the feeling, that quiet shift in the air when laughter turned sharp, when glances lingered a second too long, when her name stopped sounding like her name and started sounding like a joke. She was just a teenager, still learning how to exist in her own body, still unsure where her hands belonged when she walked, still practicing smiles in mirrors that never smiled back. She wanted what every other girl wanted, to belong, to be seen, to feel safe. But school had other plans. The hallways were loud, but she felt alone. Lockers slammed like punctuation marks in a sentence she never agreed to be part of. Voices blended together until one voice stood out. The one that laughed at her shoes. The one that mimicked her voice. The one that whispered just loud enough for others to hear. She tried to pretend it didn't matter. She told herself words were just words. That laughter was harmless. That if she stayed quiet it would pass. But the body remembers what the mind tries to ignore. Her stomach tightened every morning. Her chest felt heavy before the first bell even rang. She learned to walk faster with her eyes down, to sit in the back, to become smaller. At lunch she chose the farthest table, the one near the trash cans, the one nobody wanted. She told herself it was peaceful there. But peace shouldn't feel like punishment. She watched other girls laugh together, sharing secrets, sharing snacks, sharing moments she felt locked out of. She wondered what it was about her that made people decide she was different, that she was acceptable to hurt. The bullying grew slowly, like a storm that starts with clouds you barely notice. Jokes became insults. Insults became routines. Routines became expectations. They expected her to flinch. So she did. They expected her to stay quiet. So she did. They expected her to disappear. And some days she almost did. She tried to talk to teachers, but the words came out wrong. Too small. Too unsure. She worried she was exaggerating. She worried she was weak. She worried that telling the truth would make it worse. So she swallowed it. All of it. Every insult. Every laugh. Every look. At home she locked her door and lay on the floor staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling she memorized crack by crack. She wondered how many other girls stared at ceilings, asking the same questions. What is wrong with me? Why am I not enough? When will this stop? Her phone became both a lifeline and a weapon. Messages lit up the screen. Some kind. Most cruel. Words typed by people who would never say them out loud. Words designed to burrow deep. Words that stayed even after the screen went dark. There were nights she cried until her body felt empty. Nights she pressed her face into a pillow so no one would hear. Nights she imagined what it would be like to wake up as someone else. She did not want to die. She just wanted the pain to stop. One night she opened a notebook, not because she thought it would help, but because she had nowhere else to put the thoughts. The words poured out without permission. Anger, fear, loneliness, hope she didn't trust. She wrote about the girl she was before, the girl who laughed easily, the girl who believed people were kind, the girl she missed. Writing did not fix everything, but it gave the pain somewhere to go. Each page felt like breathing out after holding her breath too long. She wrote every night, sometimes only a few lines, sometimes until her hand cramped. She wrote about school, about the bullying, about the shame, about the anger she wasn't allowed to show. Slowly something changed. The words stopped being only about survival. They started becoming about strength, about endurance, about refusing to vanish. She created an account online, anonymous, hidden, safe. She shared a piece of her writing, then another, then another. She expected silence, or cruelty, or nothing at all. Instead, messages came, from strangers, from girls like her, from boys who didn't know how to say they were hurting, from people who said, I feel this. I thought I was alone. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. The girl who had been ignored in real life was suddenly being heard. Her pain was no longer isolated. It was shared. It mattered. She began to understand something powerful. Her story had weight. Her voice had value. Her survival meant something. She was still bullied, still afraid, still unsure. But now she carried something new. Purpose. She kept writing. She kept sharing. She kept speaking even when her voice shook. At school she started raising her hand, sitting straighter, meeting eyes, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was tired of being invisible. One day a teacher asked her to read something she had written. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled, her voice cracked. But she read anyway. The room was silent, not the heavy, cruel silence she was used to, but a listening silence, the kind that holds space. When she finished, no one laughed. Some people looked away, Some wiped their eyes. Some nodded. That day did not end bullying, but it changed something inside her. She was no longer just a target. She was a voice. From that moment, the story kept growing. Beyond her school, beyond her town, beyond what she ever imagined. After that day, something inside her refused to go back to sleep. The fear was still there. The bullying did not magically disappear. But a line had been crossed. Not by them, by her. She had spoken, and the world had not ended. The hallways were still loud. The whispers still existed. But now she noticed something else. Some people looked at her differently. Not with cruelty, but with curiosity, with recognition. She began to realize that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway. At home she continued writing, but now her words carried intention. She wrote not only for herself, but for the invisible audience she knew was listening. The girls hiding in bathrooms, the boys pretending they were fine, the kids scrolling late at night searching for proof they mattered. Her online following grew slowly, then suddenly. What began as a few comments turned into hundreds, then thousands. Her inbox filled with stories that sounded painfully familiar. Stories of bullying, of loneliness, of quiet suffering. She read every message, sometimes with tears, sometimes with anger, sometimes with gratitude. She answered when she could, offering words she once needed to hear. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not alone. She did not realize it yet, but she was becoming something she never planned to be. A leader. At school, administrators noticed. Teachers invited her to share more. Assemblies were organized. Rooms filled with students who sat in silence as she spoke. Her hands shook every time. Her heart raced. But once she started talking, the words came easily. Because they were true. She talked about what bullying feels like. Not the version adults imagine, but the real one. The constant tension, the exhaustion, the way it follows you home, the way it lives in your head. She talked about how silence hurts, how jokes can scar, how cruelty leaves marks no one sees. And she talked about survival, about holding on, about finding one small thing that keeps you grounded. For her it was writing. For others it might be music, art, movement, friendship. After each talk, students approached her. Some hugged her without saying a word. Some whispered thank you. Some said I needed this. Each interaction carved something permanent into her identity. She was no longer just enduring pain. She was transforming it. Online, her videos spread beyond her state, beyond her country. Millions of views, millions of strangers listening. Media outlets reached out. Interviews followed. She sat under bright lights answering questions she never imagined anyone would ask. How did it feel? How did you survive? What would you tell others? She answered honestly. I was scared. I almost gave up. I'm still learning. Her authenticity became her power. But growth brought pressure, expectations, responsibility. Some days she missed being invisible, missed not carrying other people's pain, missed being just a teenager. She learned that healing is not linear, that old wounds can reopen, that strength does not mean invincibility. There were days she doubted herself, days the old voices returned, days she wondered if she deserved the platform she had. On those days she returned to her notebook, the same one that saved her once. She reminded herself why she started. She wrote not for the audience, but for the girl she used to be. The girl sitting alone at lunch. The girl crying into a pillow. The girl wondering if life would ever change. Slowly her mission became clear. She wanted to change the conversation, not just about bullying, but about empathy, about kindness, about responsibility. She began working with organizations, schools, communities. She helped develop programs, workshops, resources. She learned how systems fail, how silence is often easier than action, how adults sometimes overlook pain because it is inconvenient. She spoke anyway. Each stage was bigger, each audience more diverse, but the message remained the same. Words matter, presence matters, listening matters. She reminded people that bullies are often hurting too, but that pain is never an excuse to cause harm. She advocated for accountability, for compassion, for education, and through it all she stayed grounded in her story, never forgetting where she came from, never erasing the pain that shaped her, because that pain gave her credibility. It made her real. Years passed. She grew older, stronger, more certain. The girl who once wished to disappear now stood fully present in her life. She still felt fear, but fear no longer controlled her. She walked toward it, used it, let it sharpen her voice. Millions continued to listen, but she measured success differently. Not in views, not in numbers, but in messages like, "I didn't hurt myself because of you. I spoke up because of you. I feel seen because of you." She understood then that inspiration is not about perfection. It is about honesty. It is about standing in your truth even when it trembles. Her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who found strength inside it. As her voice reached more people, her understanding of pain deepened. She learned that bullying wears many faces, that it is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it hides behind jokes. Sometimes it hides behind authority. Sometimes it hides behind silence. She listened more than she spoke. In classrooms, in community halls, in small conversations after events when someone stayed behind. Eyes down, voice low, hands shaking. They told her things they had never said out loud. About fear, about shame, about feeling invisible even in crowded rooms. Each story settled inside her, not as a burden, but as a reminder. This work mattered. She realized that bravery is contagious, that when one person speaks, others find permission to speak too. She began encouraging young people to tell their own stories. Not to perform them, not to polish them, but to honor them. She told them, your voice does not have to be loud to be powerful. It just has to be honest. She watched students who once hid begin to stand straighter, begin to look up, begin to believe that their presence mattered. But even as she inspired others, she continued to face her own shadows. Fame did not erase memory. Applause did not silence doubt. There were moments when she returned home exhausted, emotionally spent. She lay awake wondering how many stories one heart could hold. On those nights, she returned again to the basics. Breathing, writing, stillness. She learned that taking care of herself was not selfish. It was necessary. She surrounded herself with people who reminded her of who she was beyond the work. Friends who laughed with her, family who grounded her, mentors who guided her. Slowly, she began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as a whole person. She pursued education, learning about psychology, communication, advocacy. She wanted to understand the systems she was trying to change, not just emotionally, but structurally. She wanted lasting impact. Her message evolved, from survival to prevention, from awareness to action. She challenged schools to create safer spaces. She challenged parents to listen without judgment. She challenged students to recognize their power. She spoke about bystanders, about how silence supports cruelty, about how choosing kindness can interrupt harm. She reminded audiences that change is rarely dramatic. It happens in daily decisions, in small moments, in noticing who is sitting alone. She shared stories of hope, stories of reconciliation, stories of growth. She acknowledged mistakes, admitted when she did not have answers, showed that leadership includes humility, and people trusted her because of it. One day, she stood on a stage larger than any before. Lights bright, crowd vast. She paused before speaking, taking in the moment, not with pride, but with gratitude. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who walked hallways afraid, the one who wrote in a notebook just to survive. She spoke to that girl, through every word. You made it. You are still here. You matter. The audience listened. Some cried. Some held hands. Some felt something shift inside them. In that moment, she understood that her life had become a bridge between pain and possibility, and she knew the work was not finished, because stories never really end. Somewhere, another teenager was standing in front of a mirror, deciding how to survive the day. Somewhere, another young person felt invisible, unheard, unworthy, and because of her story, they might hold on one more day. Speak one honest sentence. Reach out instead of retreat. That is how change happens, one voice at a time. She did not erase the past. She honored it. She did not pretend the pain never happened. She used it. She turned survival into purpose, and purpose into hope. And in doing so, she became proof that even the quietest voice can echo across the world.